On my second one, I met Tom. Subsequently became kind of friendly with Tom. He brought me over to do another movie with him after Band of Brothers. So that was my first film in America. And so, he wrote me a letter to get my green card. I mean, he used to steal cigarettes from me on set. So I think it's payback.
So the big thing, I mean, you obviously there's various things we're going to talk about, and I guess the big thing is always the most recent thing for anyone. But I mean, one of the big things you did was Band of Brothers in 2001, which is still regarded as like one of the iconic TV shows, the most expensive TV show ever made at the time. I think it was more than like $10 million an episode, which these days is like, yeah, that's normal. Game of Thrones, The Crown, that's what they cost.
Commercials,
yeah. But back then it was this huge show. So did you think at the time when this appeared in your orbit, wow, this is big. This is going to be big?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, that question's been raised a couple of times, and a lot of the boys all have various answers. I've been doing a lot of work for various foundations in the States, mainly to do with World War II veterans and historical sites and all that kind of jazz. But the question is often raised, and there's two or three of us that do a lot of these panels and Q&As, and most of the guys would say no. And I'm always one of the few that goes against that grain. Like, I knew exactly what this show was. I knew it from day one. I knew it when I got the script. I knew it when I read the book. The research that I was putting in, I just knew we were onto something special. And of course you have, arguably the two biggest influences in Hollywood. You have Mr. Hayes and Mr. Spielberg on board, and, history has sort of proven that they don't mess it up. So I was fully aware, but I was also, and again, a lot of the guys did this too, which made the show special. We were fully aware of the legacy of the real men. So even though you're doing a Hollywood show, essentially, the millions of dollars they're spending, I think it was 12 million pounds an episode. It's about 15 million, 16 million dollars an ep. We knew the money that was going into it. We knew they had the best of the best, costume designers to sound mixers. I mean, we just knew that the greatest crew and talent was involved. HBO had also become this massive powerhouse, especially in America. And so we knew it was just in good hands, but the legacy was so important to us, and I knew how big that legacy was too. And I also knew what, not that we had it on our shoulders, but we were going to be able to re-teach World War II to our generation and the generation that followed. And that was, not a burden; it was an honor. So yeah, I knew.
Yeah, you definitely knew. You definitely knew. And so at what point in the process do you meet Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg? Are they there from the off? Do you audition for it, or was it a done deal beforehand?
No. Back then it was everybody had to read. And they were going through LA, New York, Chicago, London, Australia, Sydney. They were looking for actors everywhere. So everybody knew about it. Every guy of my generation, everybody knew. The ones who were already, famous, the ones who weren't, the ones who were working all the time. Everybody knew about Band of Brothers. And yeah, the process was, and again, it's all varied. There were some guys that had to go through 10 auditions and still didn't get the job, which is tough. I was very fortunate. I did 3. On my second one, I met Tom. Subsequently became kind of friendly with Tom. He brought me over to do another movie with him after Band of Brothers. So that was my first film in America. And so, he wrote me a letter to get my green card. I mean, he used to steal cigarettes from me on set. So I think it's payback, because he did not smoke, but I think he was just around all dudes. And so it was just this weird, World War II thing. I don't know. And I remember him tapping me up for a cigarette. I'm like, can you just buy some Marlboros on your way to the studio, governor? um, but
that's funny.
Yeah.
I don't know what's funny. The fact that Tom, you can clearly afford cigarettes, so maybe buy your own. And also the idea of him going, no, I don't smoke, but this looks kind of, I want to hang with the boys. So can I join you?
It really was that. And I don't mean that in a, emasculating way in any stretch. It was just like, even the actors, there were people that did not smoke that were having a cigarette. And, we would, like, I wouldn't touch a cigarette now, but back then I was a heavy smoker. Everybody was, and everybody was just, bumming snouts all day long off everybody. And so, so anyway, I got on great with him. He directed one of the episodes as well, which, I had prominent stuff to do. So that was fun. And Stephen was, I always, people talk about creating your destiny and all that sort of stuff in the world right now. I always had, and I still do, I have just an inkling that I'm going to work with certain people. And Steven Spielberg was one of them. I was like, I'm going to work for Spielberg one day. And I thought it was going to be him directing me. That hasn't happened yet, but I still, hold hope. But yeah, met him many times. And again, I became a familiar face to him, which was lovely. I tell this story often too. Every time I see him, he'll always smile. He salutes me and says, "Hey, soldier." And that's either really sweet or he just can't remember my name. It's one of them. It's really sweet. "Hey, soldier." And then we hug. And like one of my greatest memories that is just a ludicrous Hollywood story was I was at the famous Culver Studios shooting a film called The Polar Express that Tom was in, and we were this weird cartoon thing. We didn't really know what we were doing at the time, but we were there going, so there was Tom. It was directed by Robert Zemeckis, who I was a massive fan of, who did all the Back to the Future films, Forrest Gump, Castaway. I mean, massive, the biggest of the biggest. And so we had all the Gump crew and special effects guys and all of that. Everybody was on Polar. And for the first 3 weeks, it was just Tom and I and Bob, and I was acting opposite Tom, like when he plays like 5 roles. So when he's like Santa Claus, I would be the kid, and then we would switch and he'd be the kid and I'd be Santa Claus. And so when people say, "What'd you do in that movie?" I'm like, "I've no idea. I think I was like 10% of him. Don't know." And there were things that I would do that Tom would then take and mimic and put it into the film. And so it was sort of like this weird, I was basically just, I don't know, being his scene partner, I guess. But it was a magical experience. And it's just me, him, Bob Zemeckis. And one morning, Tom says, "Steven's coming down. He's coming down to say hi." I said, "Oh, that's fantastic." So Steven comes down, of course. "Hey, soldier," usual. We have a hug. And I think it was like in between takes. And the 4 of us are just standing. So there's Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Robert Zemeckis, Ross McCall. And we're talking about whatever. Don't even remember what the conversation was, but it was nice and, and all very relaxed and chatting and laughing and joking. And then one of the assistant directors comes over and, "So sorry to interrupt, Ross. We need you. We're lining up the next shot." I was like, "Done. Okay. I'll see you in a minute." "Yeah, see you, Stephen. Great to see you." Blah, blah, blah. And as I'm walking away, I literally stop in the middle of a soundstage in Sony Studios, in Culver Studios. And I just look back and I just go, "What was that? Like, what was that?" That is like, that's the dream. The fact that I've just been stood with those 3 people who I just, I'm a fan of and admire. And we were probably talking about, I don't know, cheese, and here I am, dressed in a wetsuit with weird dots all over my face, making a movie. It was one of those surreal, wow, I come from Glasgow and here I am. It was one of those moments.
Yeah.